do the minimum possible for the maximum amount of attraction points. Oh, I want to get a nose job. Great. What's the risk? I could, have trouble breathing. I want to grow taller, but I might not be able to walk. If you're a good looking guy, things don't happen for you. You still have to make things happen. But if you're a good looking girl, things happen to you. Now, if you're ugly, and you have friends, those are your real friends.
Yeah.
I will tell you this though. I have guys who look like male models, get on coaching calls with me, and I'm like, for me, cold approach, once you know what to do, it's just a form of freedom. Because I can see a girl I like, and I'll be like, look, she looks good. I'm going to go talk to her. But it was also an online dating experiment. We had we call regular white guy, regular Asian guy. And we had a model white guy and a model Asian guy. Okay, and if you were to guess, what do you think the results were?
So yeah, do you want to kind of tell my channel a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, Maticus, thanks for the intro. I'm not that big yet where people would like attack me directly. It's like I'm focused on the subject itself, and people can glean from that what value they will. And ultimately, I tell like prospective students, I'm like, look, do an A/B test. Take something I told you, go test it, and then test someone else's, and then see what the results are, and then see for yourself like which one's better for you.
And have you had any hate recently, or kind of how do you deal with that? Because I know that's, as your channel's growing now, so as you grow, there's gonna be a little bit of backlash, I think, because people, you have your philosophy and people are going to disagree with certain aspects of it.
I've dealt with like the minuscule hate on TikTok, but it doesn't affect me whatsoever. But on YouTube, I've noticed that other people in my industry or students are like, oh, I've worked with this coach and he said this about you. Well, someone said it's like you're a little bit too hard on them. So I have switched up my coaching style to be more like positive reinforcement. Because I was trained through like mistake, correct.
Typical
so
kind of like, Asian. Yeah.
Like the Asian kind of, get hit once if you get a 99 on a test, get hit once every time you miss a point. I was raised that way. So I'm trying to change up my style to be more like encouraging.
Yeah, I definitely feel like I was kind of the same with my mum. Obviously, she was raised in China, but my dad, because he was raised here, a little bit more chill, a little bit more relaxed. So I think I had a little bit more of balance. But yeah, I totally relate to that. So I feel like it's more first impressions online, especially, than it ever was before. And that sort of changed it in terms of if you meet someone in real life now, I feel like there's more pressure on appearance. So I thought this video would be really interesting to kind of just, if you had some tips, and I've got kind of some topics I want to discuss about how you can sort of optimize your appearance, if you like, or optimize your looks to kind of make dating a little bit easier.
Yeah, so let me take a step back. So before you do anything, there has to be a decision in your mind, like, I want to improve the way that the world perceives me. Because once you make that decision, then it becomes, I can control how people react to me based on the way I look, at least in the beginning of my interactions, you see. And that's the first step. And unfortunately, a lot of guys don't even reach that first step. And a lot of guys have the fallacy like, she's going to like me for me, or she's superficial, or she's going to judge me for how I look or how I dress. And that is a form of, in my opinion, mental laziness as well. Because the reality is you judge other people on how they look too. Everyone does.
Yeah.
At least in the beginning. First impressions are important, at least in the beginning. That's just a fact of life. So you have to make a decision and say, look, I want to control how people perceive me rather than just leaving it up to chance. So that's the first step. Unless someone takes that first step, I'm not even going to help them, because what happens is you end up telling your friends they look bad, or you give them suggestions and they just look at you weird. It's like, it's unnecessary social conflict. Same thing with dating. It's like, oh, she's gonna like me for me, and I'm looking at this guy and all the girls are like rolling their eyes. I'm like, things have to change for you for things to happen. I had a lunch yesterday with a female friend and her guy friend at the office, and she's like, ask him, he's a coach, ask him questions. And he's like, nah, I'm good. And I'm like, this guy needs help, right? Obviously. But I also told her, look, I started helping out my friends when I started, but it's hard because they take it for granted. But now when students come to me, they're ready to pay because they've already, in their mind, they've already made a decision. I'm willing to invest in myself. And I think this coach can help me do that, right? So that's step one. The second step is, for most guys, you can go head to toe. That's one method. Another method is to copy someone that looks like you and go on Pinterest and find like different styles you can kind of emulate and find out, how do I emulate this?
Find your phenotype, basically. That's what they say, isn't it?
We call them lookbooks. So find a lookbook that suits you. But even before that, most guys don't even need to go that hard. Like, depending on where the client is, most of the time it's like, dude, your clothes don't fit, right? Fit is the most important thing. Um, you're matching like a jean jacket with like khakis. Like it doesn't work, right? There's a matching problem, or like there's a color problem. Like your whole closet looks like very like gray. You know, there's no color to your palette. So these are things that you can see client by client. Okay, different people respond differently to different learning methods. So for you, for example, I could say, look, Maticus, go from your hairstyle, start, hair, eyebrows, nose, any kind of foundation you can put that wouldn't look too feminine, lip gloss, or keeping your lips not chapped, right, dry.
Yeah.
All the way down from head to toe. You can analyze every single little thing. But that's not necessary for a lot of guys. For a lot of guys, it's just clean, shower, be well groomed, find clothes that fit, have a basic style or outfit that you liked of someone that kind of looks like you, has your height or your face structure. Go on Pinterest. I always use Pinterest. I think Pinterest is like 90% women. So most guys don't use it, but for style, it helps. And then just try to emulate that style. Try to break it down. What's that hairstyle? What product is he using to get that? What are the clothing pieces? Is this a V-neck? Is this is it a jacket over a V-neck? Or is it like, are these jeans? And then in Pinterest, the cool thing is you can even tag, some people tag the brands that they're using, right? Or if you go to like a lookbook website, there are a lot of them out there. They tag, like you can go directly to the site. When you go to the site, or if you go online, sometimes you can get a really good deal. The problem is you can't feel it, so you don't know if it always fits. And so sometimes you got to send it back, whereas going to a store will train your eye to like understand texture and how that size, like a medium size, like at Gap is different than like a medium at Guess, right? So how those sizes fit you. So all those things encompass style, right? But I'm getting into like the details of how to implement. But going back to the original, it's just making that decision and then just fixing the major glaring mistakes that just automatically girls will just rule you out, right? Like smelling bad, white socks with like leather shoes, unless you're Michael Jackson, right? The unibrow, right? The very common mistakes, or like a really bad like acne scars, which is not your fault. There's things you can do there for sure. Really like yellow teeth, like jacked up teeth. That kind of these are what we call like automatic outs. Like the moment she sees you, you're out of the dating game. Like it's over. If you're going for a girl, in my opinion, with the marketplace value that's above 7, it's like you're out. Like you're not even competing anymore. But of course, some people don't care. But I would say if you're going after some decent level of competition in the marketplace, these are things you have to worry about. Not worry about, just be aware of and fix.
Yeah, gotcha. That's really interesting, actually. You kind of covered I suppose you kind of covered a haircut already. You've covered, in fact, you touched upon eyebrows. That was one of the points I was going to bring up. But what do you think of clean shaven versus stubble versus beard? Because obviously, for me as an Asian fella, I can't grow a beard, right? So I get this like little stubble around, like a little tash, and a little bit down there. But obviously, I've never been able to grow a beard, so I think kind of the logic is, you just. And I said to one of my friends, I was like, I wish I could grow a beard like you. He's got a majestic beard. But he was like, you don't need to grow one. You've got a good jawline. So just clean shaven all the time. I was like, do you know what? I have no choice but to clean shave because I can't grow anything there. What is your kind of opinion on, I noticed you've got a bit of stubble there, but have you ever tried to grow a beard, or what's your opinion on facial hair?
My opinion on facial hair is the same as my philosophy on style, which is do the minimum possible for the maximum amount of attraction points, right? Like everything I do in style is related, when I first started, was to get the results. Like, what's the minimum amount of effort to get maximum result in dating? Nowadays, I just do what's the minimum required for this social event. Like, I'm not in style for like, I'm not like, oh my God, this is the new purple of the season. So cool, girl. Like, I'm not in that. I've worked in modeling. I've been in that fashion industry. So that's not my goal. If you listen to my advice, it's minimum effort for maximum gains. So maintaining a beard is difficult for most guys, right? Even the full grown ones, you need beard oil. You have to like trim it. So for me, it's like a lot of work to maintain beard. So most of the time, I would say, unless it naturally grows, it's almost not worth it. Just shave it. You're fine. You're better off shaving it. Some guys get like hair implants for beards. Like, it's just insane the amount of work that goes into it. Yeah, it's like, what's the point? And it feels uncomfortable. The only reason I have like stubble is like, I don't like to shave every day. But for Asian guys, I would say most of the time, because of stereotypes, beards don't generally tend to look good on us. I think we look better clean shaven.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's really insightful, actually. As we talk about kind of Asian guys and dating, I know I've not really seen many Asian people with really great beards, if I'm honest. I know there's a YouTuber. I'll just briefly discuss him. I think he's called Austin Dunham, and he's quite a big channel, and he's been using like minoxidil to grow a beard. But so that's that hair growth sort of serum.
Even topical minoxidil has side effects for some people. So like you got to ask, like, at what cost am I? Oh, I want to get a nose job. Great. What's the risk? I could, have trouble breathing. I want to grow taller, but I might not be able to walk. Like if you had like a magic lamp and he's like, would you make this trade? But like, most people would say no, right? But if you're so desperate, you're like, I want to make this trade, but you got to think about the ROI. For most guys, if you just fix the basic stuff with your style, have a basic style that looks slightly above average compared to all the white guys in khakis and, like plaid shirts, right? They go to the bar in the States, that's what they all look like. That the rest of the gap in this, the 2 points from 7 to 9, I'm talking about sexual marketplace value on average, right? You can make up with like good game. So you don't need to like be a 9. For a guy, you don't need to be like a hot 9. You can be a 7 and still get a 10. But I mean, look, if you're a 5, yeah, you need to close that gap, right? To at least a 7. But if you're a 7, which most guys are, if they take care of themselves, you can get a 9 or 10 if you have game to cover the gap. So it's all about like perspective. And then I would say just like how much effort I'm putting into this. I do think that in the beginning, if you never thought about this, just being aware of like how you look, it's a very transformative experience. Like, oh, I can control how I look. When I look in the mirror, I feel good. And I can, wow, I'm getting these reactions. If I dress a certain way, if I wear, this tie and the suit that fits, I find that people respect me more in job interviews, I can dress down and go to a friend's casual event and still look good enough where if I see a cute girl walk by, I can go say hi and, it would work for me. So you can start controlling how the world reacts to you. And that's a very powerful feeling because you're starting to take back control as opposed to letting things happen randomly, right? Which most guys do. So having style, having the discipline to say, I can control my visual appearance to the world is a form of power through the control of style. That you can get different reactions. The paradox of this is that, and I fell into this trap when I was modeling too, because when you're modeling, everyone's like, oh, you got this dot here, your nose is a little bit too big. It's like, well, every day you hear that. So after a while, it starts becoming your life, and it's like, no, this is something you take care of. And then if you're sick, if I'm sick and I'm going to the store to buy food, am I really going to care about what I'm wearing? No, I don't give a, right? So you have to let that go, right? This skill set's supposed to help you enrich your life. Then you learn it, and then you stop thinking about it once it becomes automatic. Most guys don't even have the basics. So just getting the basics down will take probably a few months. And then once they have it down, you'll have it for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I got you. And I guess that kind of brings us on to, I mean, we briefly discussed it as well, but I think the dressing well part is obviously quite a big part of your philosophy, as you kind of talked about. And for me, just to give it a little bit of background, prior to like this year, so I'm 27 now, but prior to, this year, I would think that dressing in a hoodie and trackies all the time was appropriate because I used to go, my mentality was that if I'm comfortable, I don't care really what I look like. I had a mop hairstyle. My acne was pretty bad. I literally had acne from 16 until 26. It was, it wasn't like the worst acne. It was like moderate. And so like I didn't necessarily have confidence in the way that I looked. And essentially what happened was I started online dating, and I thought I was going to get rejected a lot, and I had a lot more success than I anticipated. And I think from there, that was a confidence booster to then I was like, I'm going to take more care of my appearance. I can dress better. My kind of typical style now is to have chinos or jeans with like a plain white tee and then like a shirt over it. And obviously the shirt will be plain if we're going somewhere vibrant, or if it's, sort of a plain kind of less vibrant area, I'll wear a more patterned kind of shirt. Or really what I liked when you talked about it is wearing like a leather jacket. And I find that really, for some reason, I get a lot more looks when I wear a leather jacket. If it's a black leather jacket, a grey leather jacket. I've ordered like a navy blue one, so I'm going to have one of every color. But definitely, since I've changed the way that I dress, because I was always showering, I don't think I smelled bad anyway. But since my acne cleared up, since I got the right haircut, since I started dressing differently, that's made me feel more comfortable, more confident. So do you feel like a lot of it's all up here, isn't it? It's all in the mind as well, because that can change the way that you go and approach a lady out on the street, cold approach or in a sort of warm approach setting. What's your kind of view on any recommendations for kind of style? Do you have a specific style that you follow? And what would you recommend? Is there like a specific Asian man style? Do we have to dress differently compared to a Caucasian guy?
Yeah. So your experience is pretty unique because most guys go online dating and it doesn't work for them. And then they're like, what can I do to fix that? So probably because you're naturally already what we waffles would call like a normie or a Chad, low Chad. Pretty
Yeah, he
funny,
said
right?
yeah, I got like so before kind of yeah, I don't necessarily agree with the black pill, but I understand like the looks maxing. And I think because I'm tall as well, I'm 6'2", so
He would probably call you like a low Asian Chad, or like a high Asian normie, right? Based on his scale.
yeah.
So then you would get results without knowing what to do, or maybe you do know a little bit about what to do. So that's good. That's different than most of my clients' experiences. A leather jacket is kind of like it's almost like a suit of armor, right? Without like you can wear the suit, but the suit is also very like this guy really tried. You know, he's really like dressing up. Unless that's your normal like everyday attire. Unless you're in New York or you're working in finance, you don't really need a suit every day, right? But a leather jacket you can just throw on, and it just adds a level of dominance that a lot of I would say Asians, but also guys that don't have a lot of dominance naturally can gain dominance with just one item, which is pretty efficient in my opinion. So leather jacket's good. I don't have a particular style for Asian guys. I mean, it depends where you are. I think also like style for Asian guys in Asia is different than style for Asian guys in the States. For me, like I was living in San Diego, like I'm competing against like military dudes, you know, like so I had to, you know, am dominant. But if you're in New York, it's more you can be metrosexual and still get girls, right? I know back in the '80s, guys were dressed very feminine, and they got girls. Whereas like in the '90s, it was more like about like you know Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone, and so it just depends on the trends. Um, every guy has to have a basic level of visual dominance to create that initial spark. Okay, and then your communication skills come after that. There's a level of unspoken I'm a man. And there's different ways. How do I become a man, Giovanni? Well, there's different ways to do that technique-wise, visually, and also communication. But those really are the only two things you need: the visual part down, and the communication part.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. So what I kind of noticed was obviously, I think it was on Wheat Waffles' channel that he talks about the warm approach, the cold approach, and the online dating approach. And I think actually I had to work really hard on my social skills because I'm naturally quite introverted and I was quite a shy kid growing up. So when I started the online dating, I think the reason why that worked better for me is because perhaps I didn't really have that much game at the start and I had to work really hard at that. Whereas I noticed, you know, I've not really done many cold approaches. I only did one. I've only done one so far, one or two. And in both cases, I got the number, but then nothing happened out of it. So I know you have to do quite a few cold approaches to, I think the success rate is like 50, 60%. It's supposed to be higher than a online dating approach. And then warm approach, I've had, you know, some relationships from the warm approach. But I just find it really interesting, kind of what's been your experience with, because I know you made a video on online dating and optimizing your profile and things. It's pretty clear that you've obviously had the best experience with more sort of cold approach or warm approach compared to online dating. How do you feel? How do you go about like a kind of a cold approach, and how do you? Yeah, I just thought it'd be really interesting to ask you because you've obviously done a lot of cold approaches and you have that confidence and the aura. Whereas I'm just like shaking when I did my first cold approach. My hands were just trembling.
Yeah, yeah, I understand the question. So, okay, let's play a thought experiment. Okay, let's just take a city I used to live in. Let's say you're living in San Diego, and San Diego has, when I was living there, it was 1.3 million. It's a population, so it's a okay city. It's not that big, right? Just for comparison, Bay Area has about 7 million people. New York metropolitan area has about 9 million and growing. So San Diego is a small town. And then if you do a cold approach in San Diego, as an Asian guy, first of all, 90% of the population there, you're going to meet girls that are like 90% are white American. Your cold approach game has to be pretty strong there to get results, right? And you have to go through a lot of numbers. The nice thing about American culture, though, is that girls won't reject you right away, especially now, given the PC climate. They don't want to seem racist. So they'll talk to you. But the problem is when you cold approach them, you don't know if, like, sometimes they just won't date Asian guys. So you have to screen that out very quickly. Online dating in San Diego is not that good as an Asian guy because online dating is more superficial, right? So you have to be swiping a lot. But if you do the numbers, you can get some dates. I have found that because in smaller cities, my cold approach, I'm able to attract girls that are higher quality cold approaching than I am with online dating. My online dating quality is always lower than the cold approach quality by about 2 points. The other part we did in San Diego was we had a warm social circle, and that was very easy. The problem with the social circle is that our social circle is very superficial, so it's all like club girls, and they're fun to hang out with for a few times, but then they get really annoying. So, so that's a warm approach. Now a lot of time, effort, even financial investments went into that to build that circle, and it can be worthwhile if that's your goal in your 20s and you just want to party. But it's definitely like an investment, right, for sure. Now that's San Diego. Now let's take New York City. You can cold approach and you can meet models, right? Like only in like what other city can you just meet models like every other block? Probably one or two cities in the world. New York is one of them. You'll never run out of girls to talk to, right? So cold approaching New York, you can actually get 10s, right? If you're just like even a 7, if you consistently cold approach and you know what you're doing, you can get a 10. Online dating is really good in New York because the ratio is in your favor, right? There are more single women in New York than any other city in the US compared to single males, okay? So online dating, I know clients who don't think they're that good looking, they get results once they move to New York. Then warm approaching New York is interesting because New York is so big and so eclectic that it just depends on which circle you're in. If you're the leader of the chess club, you're probably not going to meet a lot of girls. But if you're like organizing, brunches, or if you're organizing yoga Pilates class, right, or board game night, and you happen to invite a lot of girls, and you're the main guy, once you build that warm circle, it's can be very lucrative, right, in terms of social value gains and whatnot. So that's the comparison. For me, cold approach, once you know what to do, it's just a form of freedom. Because I can see a girl I like, and I'll be like, look, she looks good. I'm gonna go talk to her. And you never know. Now, cold approaching, even for me, even if you're like, Brad Pitt's famous, but if you look like Brad Pitt and you weren't famous, you can cold approach and still get rejected because some girls just will not talk to you. Like, she has a boyfriend, she's having a bad day, she's got her earphones on. It doesn't matter how good looking you are, she's just not going to talk to anybody, right? You ever like on your phone, you're just trying to get somewhere and like someone interrupts you and you're like, hey, I was going to donate to you like some other day, but I'm just really busy today. I'm just not going to talk to you. You don't know if her mother just died. You don't know if her pet got sick. Like, you have no clue. It's cold. It's random. So you cannot take cold approach personally. But when you're standing there in person and she's like, I just gives you like eye rolls, like, don't talk to me, talk to the head. Like some really harsh rejections. That second time, you just say, it's like riding a bike and all right, I hit a bump. Let me warm up a little bit. After about 3 or 4, that's when I get into momentum where I'm like, oh, these rejections don't really matter. They don't know me. I don't know them. It's not about who I am. But I know that logically, but emotionally, my heart's trying to catch up. So now I'm caught up. Okay. So after the 3rd or 4th approach, nothing really stops me anymore at this point in my training. So then I just go like talk to girls I find attractive. And in any big city, whether you're in Taipei, Bangkok, New York, London, there's enough social velocity that if you talk to 3 or 4 girls, right, if you wait 10 minutes, the traffic's changed and now it's a whole group of people. Right? There's so much velocity as far as like people moving around that you'll never run out of leads. So you can practice over and over again, assuming you're not being a total creep, and get a lot of experience or get a lot of chances to play this game over and over again. And the nice thing about New York is that you can play that game at the highest level possible. Now, if you look like a scrub and you're talking to models, probably they're not going to give you the time of day, right? Unless your game is really, really good. But if you look good and you have game, there's no limit in New York as far as what you can do. Sometimes after the cold approach, you get a number and then it's like, what's my messaging game like? Or like, if you live with your mom's basement, yeah, that's going to be a problem. Then as she gets to know you, it becomes like a lifestyle issue, right? Like a top model in New York is not going to necessarily hang out with you every day if you're living, on a bunk bed with your roommate, so in a small apartment. So those things come into play. So I would say everyone, like, get to a point where you're stable, financially stable. You don't have a lot of like drama in your life. Most guys in their 20s and 30s and even 40s and 50s, as long as your life is stable to some degree, if you acquire the cold approach skill set, you can, especially even in a medium city, ideally a bigger city, you can have dating freedom just by taking action and correcting from the feedback of those actions. Actually, all my clients this year have stopped being clients because they got girlfriends, but which is nice, and then they refer other people to me. But really, all of them, by the time they get to me, have already decided, I'm gonna listen to what Giovanni has to say. And so what they've done is they created a feedback loop, right? So every time before a coaching call, they send me all the audios they've recorded with permission, like, well, for personal use, right? Only I listen to it. And they send me any type of messaging they have, and they're like, where did I go wrong here? Okay. And I review all of those before the call, and then on the call, I'm like, here's what's going on. So they have a feedback loop. Now they have the feedback. Now they go back and they correct that feedback, and they do it again and again. And after about 9 or 10 cycles, they start getting it right. And now you start seeing results, even from guys that you wouldn't think are traditionally good looking. Okay. Now, there are some exceptions. I had a client who was in Seattle, and he was getting some results, but he's like, man, these girls, like, oh, I'm like, is this what I have to live with? Like, you know, that feeling like, I guess this is the best life it can be, you know? And then he had an office, he works for a big tech company. He had an office in New York, and I'm like, look, just take 1 month at the head office in New York and just Airbnb it. He's like, okay, I'll try. So he did that. And he's like, dude, I got to move to New York, like right away. So anyway, long story short, he moved to New York. And then within 3 months of training in New York with me, we trained for 6 months total. I get an email one day, and he's like, hey, I want to do our coaching session, but the next one will be the last one, because I just want to talk to you about, you know, how do I get into this relationship? So that was the last time I heard from him. And it's nice. I like it when my clients get results. So to answer your question, I know it's been a long-winded, but hopefully useful, is that if you know how to cold approach, there's always freedom in your life, unless you live in a super small town where there's not enough social velocity. If you do online dating, the nice thing is there's a big geography, and you can, if you're in a small town, you can, you know, set your zip code to the next closest city and just do it that way. If you warm approaching, you got to invest, and we can talk about how to do that successfully, but it requires a large time, often financial and emotional investment in making friends and building that circle. All three can work for you depending on your circumstances. For me personally, I think cold approach is the most freeing, because you can go anywhere in the world and you can do it. You can do it. As long as you speak the language, you can have dating freedom. Online dating, yes, you can go anywhere in the world, but I have never, I don't know, maybe white guys have a different experience, although I don't think so, because some of them are clients and my friends, but there's always a gap. Cold approach, higher quality. Probably because online dating girls, hot girls, get 10 times the number of messages. So they have a lot of options. But not a lot of guys know how to cold approach girls. So when you're in front of her, she can't ignore you. It's like, this is who I am, right? So I have found in the last 10 years of my life that my cold approach quality, as far as like just what I can visually see, of course, over time, you get to know the person, but quality with cold approach is always 1.5 to 2 points higher than what I would get from online dating, no matter how much I swiped.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Do you know what's really interesting? You talked about what would kind of online dating be like for a white guy. Actually took, so you've seen those people do it where they like pretend to be someone else online. So I was like, on Hinge, I was like, let's give it a go. So I took a male model, I think he's in Germany or somewhere. Very, very good looking guy, like a solid, I don't know, give him like an 8+ out of 10, because I know the scale's different for wheat waffles. It's like, there's no 10s, it goes up to 9 or goes up to an 8 or whatever. So he was a very good looking bloke, 6'3", male model, didn't put that in the bio, obviously, put that he was in London. And I did it for a week. And the weirdest thing was that, he didn't get that many, like he got like a couple likes a day. His match rate was maybe like 2 or 3 at most. Sometimes 1 out of 8, and it didn't really sort of make any meaningful conversations. It didn't end up going anywhere. So I just thought that was really interesting, because he didn't do that much better than me, and I was a little bit shocked, because I thought there was going to be a huge gap. There have been times when I've sent like a like over, or this doesn't really happen in real life as and sort of in person as much for me, but online I thought, as an Asian guy, if the girl rejects me, it's because she don't like Asians, or whatever. That's my cope, if you like. And he didn't do much better than me, so I was shocked for him, because I was like, he's a male model, but at the same time, it was a nice little. It was almost a bit of a confidence boost for me. I was like, okay, I'm not doing too bad, and I think that's probably why I'm not seeking out coaching for dating, because I'm not really having problems, and I know a lot of people are struggling with problems. I feel like, obviously I can't complain. I work out, I'm tall, and I'm not terribly bad looking, so I can't complain about that. But I just thought what was really interesting was how you, in one video, you talked about the percentages of, I think it was, you're going to have to correct me because I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was 15% of girls will never date an Asian guy. Something like 70%, 75% would consider dating an Asian guy if you follow your blueprint and if you kind of show them that you're not culturally so different. And then a really small number, which I have experienced actually, a very small number of girls have, what do they call it, yellow fever or whatever. So I just thought, correct me if I've got the percentages wrong, but I found that really interesting. I mean, what are your views on that? Can you expand on that? Because I thought that was really interesting.
Those numbers are based on the US. I've lived there for 25 years, right, since college. So the US is very racially divided because if you think about it, like no other country in the world has that many different races all living together from different countries. So it is a social melting pot. It's also a social experiment. And unfortunately, with that social experiment, there are inevitable conflicts. Yes, bigger cities like New York and LA, I don't even notice that I'm Asian sometimes. I forget. But in San Diego, I distinctly, you can see that look in her eyes when she's just like, it's like you're seeing an alien, but he looks ugly. But when I go to Brazil, they see an alien, but it looks like a nice peacock. It's very beautiful. So it's a different look, and you can tell it by the look in their eye. It's kind of like a look of wonder versus a look of like foreignness, weird, and that happens in the States, especially in San Diego. San Diego has some beautiful blondes, by the way, and I dated some of them, but it was not the easiest. It was easier than the Bay Area for sure, because by then I acquired some skills when I moved, but it was not the easiest place to date. The moment I moved to LA, and whenever I go to New York, it's better. As far as the model thing, so I have two things to say about that. One is I also did an experiment. This was 10 years ago, but it was also an online dating experiment. We had we call regular white guy, regular Asian guy, and we had a model white guy and a model Asian guy. Okay, and if you were to guess, what do you think the results were? We all the same swipes, same number of swipes, okay, different profiles, very generic, profile descriptions. What do you think the results were?
Well, funny you should say that, because Nero Angelo, who's another, I basically appear to be a massive black pill right now because I'm talking about wheat waffles and Nero Angelo, but I think some of their content is actually pretty good. But they did a video. He did a video on this where he did Asian supermodel, Caucasian supermodel, 5,000 swipes. I'm trying to remember sort of the numbers here, but I think the white fella got 300 matches. And then the Asian supermodel, who was Godfrey Gao, the Taiwanese, literally the first Asian supermodel, very good looking guy. He gets an A+. And he only got, I think he got 100, I think less than 100, but the results were ridiculous. And then when they repeated it for a Asian guy and a white guy, just a regular, well, I guess they were both still pretty good looking. Godfrey Gao barely did better. In fact, he didn't do better than the average, not average, but slightly better than average looking white guy, which was actually crazy. And I suspect that was the same for your experiment as well.
It was, my experiment results were different. That's very interesting. So I did it 10 years ago, so it was a little bit longer ago. But also, you have to look at the details of the experiment. So when we swiped, we waited a week straight after the swipes for the likes to come in, because sometimes they accumulate over time. So we found that obviously the models did better. The white model did better than the Asian model, but it was by not by a lot. It was by I think 30 to 50% number of likes. The white model got a lot more, not a lot more, like 9 or 10 messages, whereas the Asian model got 3 or 4 messages. Then the regular guy and the regular Asian guy, they both didn't do that well, and the regular guy only did not that much better. It was 5 or 10% better. So those are the results I got 10 years ago. What I found from that result was that if you are at the top end of the spectrum, the results can tend to go exponential a little bit for guys, right? But for girls, it's like this. For guys, it's kind of like this. So, however, when you're really good looking, be white or Asian, the difference, we didn't find a difference that extreme at that end. So for me at that time, it was just like, how do you message girls? So that's interesting. I would like to see how he did his experiment. I'm really curious. Also, because there are a lot of white models, maybe they didn't know as a model. Whereas Jeffrey Gao, it's like, if you know, like, there's only one Asian model.
So there's quite a few, obviously, rest in peace, Godfrey Gao, but there's quite a few, and none of them are particularly huge at the moment. I can't think of Godfrey Gao's. I think there's Hu Bing. There's another guy, and he's quite a good looking guy. 10 years ago, things were probably quite different because I definitely felt that growing up. I went to a predominantly white school, and it was very. I mean, actually, to be fair, I had my first girlfriend at 11, and she had blonde hair and blue eyes, so maybe that is a bit. This was a while ago. This was like 2000 and early 2000s. But I definitely felt that in a school with predominantly white people, I literally did not have a girlfriend, didn't have any sort of or at least I didn't notice any interest throughout my entire. I don't know what it's like in where you grew up, but we have like secondary school or high school, if you like. 7 years of high school was nothing, and then it wasn't until I did my second degree. This just shows my social skills were pretty short at that point, because I did my first degree, which is your minor, if you like, which is from 18 to 21. Again, nothing. And then I literally didn't get any attention until I was sort of in my early 20s, 22, and then had my first proper girlfriend at 24. So you could call me more of a late bloomer. I definitely think I am. And everything started a bit later for me, but I definitely agree with you there. Once you hit a certain point, if you're an attractive ethnic, whether you be black or Asian or Indian, you definitely don't have those barriers as much, as opposed to, because if you're a white guy and you go to like Thailand, you're not going, even if you're average, right? I've been watching those videos on YouTube, and it just basically says that a lot of white guys who move to Thailand, they don't have a problem getting girls.
I don't want to get canceled, so someone else said this. It's like some white guy, and he was like, look, I'm not going to date black girls unless it's like Tyra Banks, right? This is like back in the 90s, like supermodel. So if you reach a certain point where you're like super good looking, or like everyone sees you and right away that reaction is hot, then it doesn't matter what race you are, you see, because you already tipped that barrier, the tipping point where people are just like, this person's hot, right? So there's that game. Then there's a game where if you're not hot, or if you're not able to get to that point, can you at least be presentable? I will tell you this still. I have guys who look like male models get on coaching calls with me, and I'm like, so what can I help you with? And you'll be surprised. I had a guy who was European, blonde hair, blue eyes, super good looking, and see, his problem is very different, right? And you would think that most guys hear that and they're like, this guy, like they start getting a little bit of that envy, jealousy, in their hearts. But I can tell you, like, it's actually, his problem is quite difficult, He has girls coming up to him at the club, and he says, Giovanni, after they talk to me for like 5 minutes, they walk away. And he's like, you don't know what that does to me. It's like I feel like they're coming to me for my looks, but they're not staying there because of my personality, and that makes me feel like shit, because it's like they're rejecting me based on who I am, rather than how I look. He'll tell me he gets matches online, but he'll message them and it never goes anywhere. So he's like, I can see the candy right there, but I can't taste it. It's like there's a window, and I feel trapped. In some ways that's worse than the guy who can't get anything, because the guy who can't get anything, the moment he gets things right, he starts seeing results. But this guy, he's seeing some results, but he doesn't know where he's going wrong. Because he's good looking, he has a high margin of error, which means he can do a lot of different things, and the girls won't give him the right feedback as exactly what he needs to change. Right. So there's pros and cons to both. And then once he corrects those, right, once he corrects them, then he starts getting results pretty quickly once he knows what sequence of things to correct. So it's not always the good guy, the best looking guy gets the best results. They just come with different problems. I can tell you this as a former, I've worked with a lot of different models. It's a blessing and a curse, because as I'm aging now, it's like, people like give me stuff or treat me well because of my looks, and that's very, very dangerous, because your looks will fade. And It's like, what if this is my insurance? What if I get a scar, I get punched, or something happens, I get older? It's a very weird feeling. So, and then what if everyone treats you one way because of how you look? And then like, you're constantly worried, like, what, my relationships aren't real. You know, it's like none of this is real. They're just reacting to how I look. And that's a weird feeling to have. Now, if you're ugly, and you have friends, those are your real friends.
Yeah.
You know, beauty is temporary, ugly is forever. So there's this guy, Pierre Woodman. He used to use that line to pick up chicks to star in his porn videos. But anyway, that's he just says that, and the girls are like, "Oh, that's interesting." So he's an ugly dude who pulls like he was one of the top porn producers. I heard from a friend, because he's not a good looking guy, but he's so good at talking that he gets these like amateur girls. And he was at one point, I think like maybe 10, 20 years ago, he was the guy who was bringing all this new talent, and people were like, how do you find these girls? And he's like, I go up to them and I talk to them, right? So that's the power. If you don't believe me, just look up Pierre Woodman.
I believe you, because I saw the very same thing on whether it's on Instagram or YouTube. There's this Asian comedian, and he's not traditionally a good looking dude, like very neotenous kind of features, and he had the typical kind of he wasn't a good looking dude, but he's married to, and he's a comedian, he's a funny guy. Really, if I find his name, I'll link him to you as well. And he's going out.
Bobby Lee, or is it someone
It
else?
might be Bobby Lee.
Game is really important. The ability to talk, having a mouthpiece, knowing what to say, how to say it congruently, how to say it authentically. Over time, people start falling for you, your ability to express yourself. That's very powerful, and most guys don't realize that. Most black pill guys like wheat waffles, although I like the guy. I like watching his videos, and I like him. I don't think they've ever experienced that, or they maybe are not open to that. They don't realize how powerful communication is. And so they kind of discount that whole area, which is like the whole other 50%, right? 50% in the beginning. In the beginning is 50-50, looks, communication. But as time goes by, for women, your behavior patterns become like 90%. And that's why you see these guys marry these really hot girls, is because these guys have strong communication. Like Robert Kiyosaki, for example. They know how to communicate really well, and over time, women start falling for them, okay? So it's very powerful, especially over time. It grows. It's an investment. This person is advancing. He's communicating clearly. I feel more attracted to him. It's so much more powerful than just like the first impression. And most guys get stuck in the first impression because they never know how that journey goes later on. So they're complaining, black pill, looks and money only matter because I'm here and I've never been here before her. It's like, dude, you don't even understand, man. I understand. You know, I used to be a hater too, but I didn't stay a hater. The guys who stay haters like 5-10 years down the road, then I start judging them a little bit. But I used to be a hater too. I hung out with a guy named Troy. He was a short Asian guy, and I saw him live. He was a mentor of mine. Attract stunning women. Girls will stop on the street to talk to him because he has such this vibe, this energy field, that he would literally, people would stop to talk to him. It wasn't just how he looked. He could control, I can't explain it. He had a reality distortion field like Steve Jobs. He can control the energy around him. And people would stop and talk to him and just like vibe with him. And I saw that and I'm like, okay, this is for real. Right. So then I saw a couple other guys, not all Asian, some white guys. And I'm like, these guys aren't good looking at all, but they're pulling girls. And at first I went out at night. I was like, oh, because the girls are drunk. And then I started hanging out with these guys who did day game. And I'm like, they're pulling really cute girls during the day. So all these limiting beliefs started going away once I started seeing what was going on. You know, back when I learned this, there wasn't a lot of like social media or YouTube. So you don't capture this on camera phones. But I saw it for real, and I started seeing that reality. And then I was like, okay, game really matters, right?
Yeah.
And then that's how I got into this. But I also realized that without the style, you have to put in a lot of work for the game, and you need time. So that's the one constraint. If you don't have the style down, you need an environment. Like I had a guy who he has an Airbnb where he only accepts bookings from hot European girls. And he lives in New York. So he's not the best looking guy, but he says, look, you just give me one night with him, one dinner, I'm good, you know? So if you don't have the style down, your initial image, then if you can somehow create an environment where there's time is to your advantage and you have game, like Casanova, for example, notoriously ugly if you look at his portraits, right? But he knew how to talk to people. So if you have time, you can convince them, you can influence them to start liking you. Very few guys know how to do that. Even I'm not that good at that. I just learned from the best, you know? I've seen it happen over and over again. So I'm like, okay, look, most people watching this, like they want to get better. Look, wherever you are now, let's say you're 5, right? If you improve your style, if you maximize your style points, right, with a minimum amount of effort, you can improve your point by 2 points on the marketplace. So from a 5, you can get to a 7. I think most 90% of guys can get to a 7 with like proper style. Okay, that includes like losing weight, fixing your teeth, all the long-term stuff too. But short-term, you can get to a 7, and long-term, you can probably get to an 8. Then from there, the other 2 points you want to close is communication skills. Right. Now, obviously, when I'm saying style and communication, I'm saying you maximize both. And to maximize both is not going to happen overnight. But if you can, that adds 4 points. So even if you're born a 4, you can date an 8 if you know what you're doing. Okay? But most guys complain, oh, it's looks for money. I'm going to stay here. And they stay here. And they accept what life gives them. And I see that over and over again. And some guys are okay with it, but for me, I wasn't. And so my job is to help people that are not okay with that to achieve the results. So that's been my mission. And I probably will do that for another year, and I'll probably retire because I don't want to be a dating coach when I'm 45 or 50.
Yeah, that's fair enough. You know what?
Yeah.
It's really interesting that you bring up the kind of, you've talked about how looks will fade. I agree, 100% agree with that. And I think actually that's not something that many dating coaches will talk about. In terms of, especially a lot of the black pillars. As someone who's kind of been on both ends growing up, I definitely, there's been at least I feel like there's been a flip switch in terms of the way that people treated me. So I definitely feel like I'm being treated better now because I'm dressing better, skin has cleared up, my appearance has changed, I have more confidence in myself. But I feel like when you were talking about that male model guy, the really good looking European fella, I just found that really interesting because I feel like if you're someone who's born good looking, right? And particularly when I matched with this Hungarian model on Hinge. And when I was talking to her, the chat was a bit dead, should we say. Like she didn't really have much to kind of offer in terms of, and she was a very good looking girl.
Because she never had to offer anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was really interesting. I just feel like if you're born pretty, in general, you're not going to really you don't have to work on your personality. Whereas if you have had a metamorphosis, if you've had a change, it's better to have a girlfriend who's like a 7 or an 8 with personality. Better to go out with a 7 with personality than to go out with a 9 who has no personality. And I think the same for me, at least with girls. And that's kind of what hopefully the European fella's doing better now. But I feel like potentially that's probably where his problem was. He was so good looking that everyone just sort of treated him differently. And as you said, didn't give him the feedback he needed to sort of grow his personality.
Yeah, okay. So if you're a good looking guy, things don't happen for you. You still have to make things happen. But if you're a good looking girl, things happen to you. Guys come up to you, you get offers. So as a good looking girl, you're going to get experience no matter what. And you'll start understanding how guys are, right? Or just by the time you're 23. However, for a good-looking girl to say, look, I'm good-looking, but I know this is just like one dimension. I'm going to actually go study for my master's or whatever. That's a very hard thing to do because especially these days where social media is exponential now, you can literally make money even
only
into like castles or, Dubai or whatever. So, get 50 grand to ride a camel, if you know what I mean. So all that temptation, right? Whereas like, I'm not going to deal with that. I'm going to go here. That's quite admirable, I would say, given today's situation. But as a guy, even as a male model looking guy, if you do nothing will happen to you. So you still have to go out there and still have to make things happen. And as a good looking guy, sometimes you get hate from other guys just because you're good looking. I'm not speaking from personal experience. Actually, I am speaking from personal experience as the ugly guy. So I used to be a hater. There's an email on my email list where I said I used to be a hater. So I used to look at these good looking guys and I really hate on them because I wasn't getting the results I wanted. And I'm like, this guy has it so good. And I got really mad, One time I was with my brother. I remember having dinner with him and this really good looking waiter was helping us. And I just felt so bitter at that. This is a long time ago. I was so bitter that I didn't tip him that night. And I always regretted it. I was because I'm like, this guy's good looking. He's got everything life has to offer. Bro, let's not tip him. And I just dragged my brother and we left. We paid for the bill, but I put 0 for the tip. And then later on, I felt a little bit of shame because I was like, that was pretty, I judge a book by its cover, right?
Mm.
But I think it wasn't about him. It was at that point I had so many failures with women that I just became so bitter that he became like my next victim. Like it was like just boiling up, and I just had to release it somehow. And he was the recipient of that just because he was good looking. So that's interesting, right? So I think sometimes being looking is a curse too. Wherever you are, ultimately, if guys don't know how to get what they want in terms of dating, whether it's sex or just the love and their intimacy, things start piling up inside and they can turn dark if it doesn't get released. Okay, we have these trapped emotions that happen. And in the extreme, you see shootouts or very extreme examples of letting that anger out, right? But most people aren't that extreme. So what happens is you see the minor pollution of that emotion getting trapped, like passive aggressive bosses or men kind of just like making snide remarks on women or treating women badly because deep down they're actually like resentful of all the unsuccessful attempts they've had at getting what they want in their love life. So I think the black pill actually is a result of that. These guys haven't received the acceptance and the love that they craved. And so therefore it's really easy to point the finger and say it's because you're sub 5 or because you don't have any money and women just care about these things, right? Solving this problem and making people realize like, look, just care about your looks a little bit to the point where it's acceptable in the market. Understand the market, accept the market as reality, okay? It's not that bad. Then like work on your communication, right? Being able to communicate and speak clearly and just having that. Most guys don't know how to get to that real conversation, man. It's like, and I've coached hundreds of clients at this point. It's pretty bad. Hey, how are you? Good. How's it going? So like, how do you like your job? What do you do? Oh, cool. So like, do you like your job? Is it nice? So like, so what are your hobbies? Okay, cool. Yeah. Sorry, I'm blanking out. Where are you from again? So these are the conversations they have, and at best they're a little bit smoother, but the questions are the same. Okay, so you're talking around the topic, but you're not really talking about the real topic. The real topic is, do you like what you do, or did you kind of fall into it and now you're doing it because it's a routine paycheck and it's nice? Now, that's not in the American culture you can say that, but in Chinese culture that's almost like taboo to talk about money like that. Again, there's a cultural issue. But what I'm really getting at is whatever you're doing now is your life mission, right? That's what I'm really getting at. What I'm really getting at is, what have you learned from your past relationships? People say, don't talk about past relationships on the first date. I'm like, no, depends how you bring it up, right? If you're talking about like, oh, I hate my ex-girlfriend, yeah, that's bad. But if you're talking about like, these are the lessons I learned and here's where I am. Most people want to know that about their partner. So how do you get to the point of a real conversation? And then that's the first date. But even in the approach, hey, how are you? How are you doing? Da, da, da. It's like, no, there are different techniques you can use. Like, hey, I'm sorry you've been waiting for me. I know you look like you're waiting for a blind date. Sorry, I'm late. And she's like, huh? That's role playing, right? She's standing there sitting by herself reading a book. So there's so many ways you can change up that interaction to make it more interesting. Rather than, hey, how are you? You're beautiful. What's your name? Every guy is saying that. And they're better looking guys than you saying that. So what do you have to offer that's different? So there's a skill to this. Most guys get there by copying lines or saying things that they learn from other coaches. So what we call clones, right? Or they're like social robots. And sometimes that works. But if you can get there at a high skill cap by what I call optimizing for authenticity. So everything you're doing is like, how can I hit that attraction trigger or connection trigger, but I'm going to do it by being more authentic. Even your style, how do I dress more authentically that reflects my personality but still creates that attraction, visual attraction spike? So now you optimize with skill cap and you're optimizing for authenticity as you're improving your skill. Then what happens is you hit this tipping point at this point where your game is very unique to your story. So now it's like nobody can compete with you, right? It's like this is your story, okay? And now your game is so powerful and it's so congruent that girls don't test you anymore because they feel the congruency of it. You don't get flaked on. You don't get these like weird interactions where it's like you don't know why you lost a girl. You know, every part of the interaction is like, this is who I am. In my opinion, the best way to learn game, and I think every 20-year-old guy should learn this, so that they can express themselves fully, they can get to know themselves fully, and then they can get the girl that they want while learning more about themselves and how to express themselves. So for me, it's a win-win, you see. A common objection is, well, it takes too much time, or, you know, maybe this is all BS. I'll give you an example, for like a very extreme example. Let's take job interviews, right? It's like, Giovanni, I can't express myself the whole time because, you know, she'll think I'm too brutally honest, or it's really embarrassing, I'm living with my parents or whatever. So there's always the issue of, if I express myself, what if I'm not good enough? Okay. So let's take the job interview, right? So, okay, I was interviewing at Google, and I had been rejected by Google 25 times. And on the 26th try, I got 2 interviews at 2 different departments at Google. So when I went in, I was like, I'm going to get this job offer no matter what. I go in there, and I use the social skills that I've learned on the side. And at the interview, there's certain managers you can read their faces and the way they react to your questions, right? So in the beginning, I'm very professional. And there's certain managers that just want to know that you can do the job. And in those cases, you don't want to like be friendly with them. You just want to say your accomplishments, and you want to look for openings where they kind of talk about their personal lives, right? But if they don't give you that opening, don't go there, because then you're breaking the rules of engagement. So how does that relate in dating? Well, hey, how's it going? You looked interesting and I wanted to meet you. You know, I'm living with my parents right now. They're diabetic. I'm taking care of them, but I just want to get out of the house and say hi. Yes, it's authentic, but you're breaking one of the rules of the game, which is you're lowering your perceived social value, and you're giving up too much information about health, about your parents. And it's not the right time to say that. You can tell her that maybe on the first date, right? And you can frame it in a way that's much better. Like, hey, I moved back home. I still have my great job. I'm really grateful, but my parents are getting older and I want to take care of them. That's a much better way to say that than I'm living with my parents and they have health problems, right? Okay, so back to the job interview, right? Sorry if I'm skipping too much, but I think hopefully it's clear.
Interesting, yeah.
So the job interview, you're talking to the manager that really just like, no BS, like, I want to know if you can do the job, right? Then I get to this guy named Jeff, and Jeff, the first question is, his first question is, hey, so how's your job search going? Okay, I could tell just from that alone, based on the gathering evidence, my working hypothesis, this guy's chill, right? So I'm like, oh, it's good. I still give a semi-professional answer. And then he's like, then he starts talking about his experience. He's like, hey, this is what it's like to work at, you know, this division at Google. And he's very casual. And I'm like, this is the guy I want to befriend. So I open up a little bit more. I'm like, yeah, you know, honestly, I got rejected a lot, but I wanted to get into Google and this might be my goal. And he was like, that's awesome. Like, that's tenacity. That's great. So long story short, Jeff becomes one of my best friends at Google after I get the job offer. Okay. And I was able to do that because I followed the rules of engagement at the first interview, but also I was able to see if there were any openings within those rules to really express authenticity more fully, right? The problem is the good thing I did was I didn't break that rule while I was talking to the other managers. Because had I did that for every manager, they would have been like, this guy, I don't care about your personal life. I want to know if you can do the job, okay? So how does that relate to dating? Why am I giving such extreme examples? Because the job interview is a very extreme example where you have to pretend to be very professional to get the result that you want, right? Especially at a company like Google, or any Fortune 500 really. So that's the job situation. In a dating situation, you have to gradually disclose authentic parts about yourself that do 2 things. One, let her get to know you, but more importantly than one is create attraction. Or how do you create attraction? By demonstrating value. So, for example, at some point in the conversation, you know, I have a client say, hey, you know, I live with my mom or my parents, what should I say? At some point in the conversation, most of the guys will be like, yeah, where do you live? Oh, you know, I live around. No, seriously, where do you live? Oh, I live with my mom, right? Super low value, okay? But if you were to take control of that and say, hey, where do you live right now? Oh, that's awesome. You have your own apartment? I used to have one too. Until I decided, right, taking control of the narrative, that my mom is getting older and she raised me and my brother, and now I want to pay it forward. Okay, I moved back home to take care of her. So, and actually now that I'm with her, you know what I realized was that when I was little, I had an image of her, but now I'm really getting to know who she really is. You know, and I'm so grateful for the time we spent together. In my culture, when I was raised, and so different than American culture, we were taught as kids to respect our elders because one day we'll get old too. And I kind of miss that, and I finally understand what that means. Okay, how powerful is that narrative versus, yeah, I live with my mom. look, dart your eyes around. So, okay, same concept, right? So at every point, learn to authentically express yourself at every point by obeying the rules of engagement of that game, whatever that social game is, okay? Because some people will judge you, they'll be hard on you, they'll test you. And you want to adhere to the rules of the game to win them over. But those people that are not playing by those rules, they'll give you signals, and then you can say, this person can be my friend, or I can have a deeper connection with this person, you see, or I can tell her more about myself earlier on in the dating process than I would some other girl to get the result that we both want, hopefully, right? So that's how I learned game, and no one else is teaching it that way. And it's not something that's like very like viral where I can just put 60 seconds, here's how you do it, right? And so my job before I retire is really to put this information out there and say, look, there's a way you can be more authentic and still create those attraction and connection triggers that get you the result for most guys of the girl that they really want. How do you do that? How did I do that over and over again? Here's the roadmap. Once I've done that and I feel like the information is out there in a way that's like educational but entertaining enough where enough people see it, then I think I'm going to retire. Because in some ways, being a dating coach in your 40s, 50s, I feel like it's a little bit sad also. My gift is, being able to recognize certain social patterns, and I think I'll move on to something else, But for now, I think this is sorely missing. And that's why I'm doing this interview with you, Maticus, and I will start putting out more videos and doing more interviews with other people. So yeah, thanks for letting me ramble on, but hopefully if you play that section back, you'll get a sense of my philosophy on how game works.
Yeah, I think what you kind of summarized there with your rules of engagement is kind of like read the room. So when you were talking about, you can tell by the way someone's looking at you. And I think that's something that I've developed over time because, being more socially awkward growing up, it's taken time for me to be able to read the room. And it's sort of, especially with dating, you can, again, going back to the more black pill, choosing signals, if you like. I don't know whether you believe it or not. I don't necessarily believe. So essentially, choosing signals are things like body language, eye contact, the way that a girl is kind of positioned. If you...
Yeah, we call it indicators of interest. It's the same concept. I understand. Yeah.
And I think over time, I've just become better. And I think it's taken a lot of time, but over time, I've become better at noticing that. And maybe before I didn't notice things like that, but now that I do, when I go to parties and things, and when I go to social gatherings, and actually that's one tip that I've learned, actually, to develop your social skills. It's like going to the gym, right? So if you want to improve your social skills, you got to go to parties, to events, to gatherings, because when you work on your muscle, it gets stronger, it gets bigger, it gets more developed, and the same with social skills. So actually, I think that's something that people now when I get invited out, I made my New Year's resolution to be, if someone invites me out to something, I'm going to go, unless I'm ill, like I've got COVID or something, and I can't actually go, or something pretty drastic comes up, because I'm like, I can only get better with my social interaction. But just to kind of summarize, I love what you were talking about, kind of, my kind of belief is that there's no one pill. Like, I don't just believe in the red pill. I don't just believe in the black pill. I don't just believe in the blue pill. I think there's elements that you can take from each of them. Like, you can ultimately, if you want a long-term kind of relationship, which is probably like, that's more my style, I'm looking for something more long-term. But that's where blue pill is important. And then obviously red pill, when you have that stability, that game that you were talking about, those social skills. And then black pill, you kind of, at the very least, it's easier if you meet like a certain level of attractiveness, like what you were saying.
If I can challenge that idea a little bit, the problem with those is that it's not first principle. So if you look at the causation of why things happen, these are second principles. These are things that are like on the surface that you can change. But really deep down, I think it comes down to like, how can I maximize my self-expression? And I think if you look at it from those lens, you'll see that these pills kind of fade away. And it's more like, where am I now, and what do I need to optimize? And how can I optimize it authentically? I think that's a more efficient way to do it. You have to go a little deeper, but I think it's more efficient than looking at it in terms of pills.
That's very insightful, Giovanni. And I actually think there's one more thing I wanted to ask you before we wrap up. But you talked a little bit about dating models, and I know you've dated a few models and I've watched some of your videos. How is it different than dating just a regular girl? And why don't you give us kind of how you kind of manage this? Give us some tips.
So there's girls who look like models who are not in the modeling industry, and then there are girls who are in modeling industry. So which one do you want to talk about?
So probably the actual models. Yeah, the models. Yeah.
Okay. To be honest with you, about 70 to 80, depending on the age range, but most young female models are younger. About 80 to 70 to 80% of them, unfortunately, the temptation is just too strong to party, and because you're just the best looking girl in your town, right? Again, I was in a beer tier modeling city, but if you're in New York, maybe it's different. But they just get offered so many things, and as a young girl, you're just like drawn to it. So 80% of them have low attention spans. They don't tend to pay attention too much to, in my opinion, serious things. And they're not the best girlfriends in general because there's too much temptation, honestly. The other 20% of the models, I see, like for example, I go to a show and I'm waiting around. There's a lot of waiting around in modeling, and I see their parents come with them, or like I see them bring their brother. Like they're like very grounded, and those other girls I want to date because they have a family social support system. They have their parents telling them like kind of guiding them along. They're just very grounded, and sometimes they'll be like reading books instead of like scrolling Instagram, right? Those are the models that I want, okay? Because the other models are just like kind of going through their phase, in my opinion. As you get older though, I think girl models that are like hitting 30, they tend to realize like, okay, the smart ones at least, they'll be like, okay, I know in this industry I'm at almost at my peak, and I need to maximize my savings, and I need to find a guy. This is the point where I can have the most option to the highest value guys, right? And they start planning for that, and you can see how they're like, I have friends who are doing that, and I'm like, this is smart. This girl's smart, because if I was a girl, I would do the same thing, right? When you have that access to find a guy. So that's the modeling scene, in my opinion. Now, obviously, there's always exceptions to the rule, but I would say, generally speaking, I don't necessarily like to date models. I prefer girls who look like models that are not.
Gotcha. Yeah, that was really and just kind of obviously I've never dated a model. Obviously, I've dated girls that look like models or could be models potentially, but obviously going back to that Hungarian model that I brought up, it is really interesting that you say that, because I definitely feel like there's a gap between in terms of their chat. I wasn't able to build anything kind of meaningful with her, so that's why the chat kind of fizzled out. And that actually, I really relate to that, what you were saying. Those girls obviously have plenty of options. They're not really that interested in something quite serious. But actually, do you know what's really interesting? And I may or may not cut this bit out, but you obviously talked about how you did a little bit of modeling. And it would be interesting to find out kind of how you kind of got into that. Do you have any tips for someone like me I'm literally just getting into it?
Yeah. Well, I didn't do a lot of modeling. I did it for like 2 years, 1.5 years for real, and then about almost 3 years like part-time. And I wasn't like a top model or anything. I did okay, but honestly, I had my own business on the side, and that was making more money than the modeling. The modeling was more like social status, and honestly, it was a lot of fun because I got to meet a lot of people that I wouldn't have met otherwise. So I wouldn't say like, if you want to know the industry or whatever, like I'm the top guy to talk to. But I had a pretty cool experience. The way I got into it was I volunteered the first year at one of the local fashion shows just to see how it worked. And what I realized when I volunteered was that I could probably model, right? Because I saw a lot of guys, and I was starting to see what's my advantage. And I realized there were a lot of tall Asian guys, and there weren't a lot of any male models who knew how to walk. And I realized that I had I could walk better than them, and I would practice and film myself. And I'm like, you know what, my walk is really good. I can do editorial or runway. So I started. Next year I came back and I befriended the person that organized that modeling show, Fashion Week, and then I basically just kind of not even charmed her. I just really introduced myself and said, look, this is something I'm interested in. Would I have a shot? And she's like, yeah, come in for auditions. But see, just like taking that one step, just introducing myself before I went into the audition was a huge advantage, in my opinion. The other advantage I saw was that a lot of models don't give a F about the support staff. And as a volunteer, I got to see like they worked really hard behind the stage, and no one thanked them. So I made it a point when I went to the auditions, like, hey, thank you guys for preparing everything for us. Everything was really well done. because I was on the other side. So I was constantly looking for like advantages that I would have compared to everyone else. So I got my first fashion show, and then from that show, one of the girls, woman, saw me, and she gave me a lot of my job opportunities after that, from that my first show. So that's how that started, right? And you'll notice how, again, I'm looking for competitive advantages, right? I'm very polite to everybody. I'm not like the other models where I don't give a F, right? When in my downtime, I'm always like looking for where I could help, right? Or just very quiet. I don't cause trouble. I got top model of the year, not because I was top model or anything, but because I didn't cause any trouble. And I was nice to like, don't cause problems and be nice to the people that are supporting you, you know, show words of appreciation. Just those two things, I think, got me top model. But, and the funny thing is most models don't do that. Most models they're causing problems, like they're late, really late for makeup, and then they're like complaining, or they're just like, this really hot. I never complain. I'm just like, I'm here to do a job, and I'm very professional, right? And I always talk to the support staff, and I always thank them. I don't see them as like beneath me, you know? I'm like, oh, hey, what's up? Hey, thanks. I remember their names. So sounds so simple, right? But when you're a young hot model, you don't think about other people. So you're like, everything's on you, and you kind of become entitled. And I was never like that. So also I got into it later on because I didn't think I could do it earlier on. So I started when I was like 28, 29, which is pretty late in the industry. So I think I just had a little bit more maturity than some of the other guys or girls. So that's how I got into that. And then there are a lot of different stories I can tell you about that industry, but I would say probably not publicly. Yeah, everyone's really nice. Like for me, it was just like an opportunity to walk the runway, understand how walk worked, understand how to sell the clothes, and understand how to look good taking photographs. There's certain skill sets you need to have to become in my opinion, a great model. But even then, it's like you still have to have the look, and it's quite competitive, right? But that was like 10 years ago. Now things have changed. Now it's like, how big is your social media? There are a lot of online models who don't fit the 6-foot requirement and stuff like that. So there's a lot of different ways to be models these days that I didn't have before 10 years ago. If someone were to ask me why I want to be a model, first question would be like, why? Why do you want to become a model? What's the point? If you want to be a model because you just like the attention, there are other ways to get attention that maybe add more value, like starting a YouTube channel. If you want to get into modeling because you want to date female models, okay, yeah, I understand. That was part of my motivation too. But I would say try dating one or two and you'll find out it's not that great. Your other motivation could be just, something to achieve, or maybe just looking good is something, you've always wanted. I get that. Try it out, go for it and try it. But just understand the main reason why you're looking for something. I think that's what I would tell my younger self.
Awesome. That is awesome, Giovanni. Thank you so much for sharing. It's been really insightful to chat with you. So obviously I'll leave a link in the description below for Giovanni's channel. So definitely go and check that out, especially if you're an Asian dude looking to work on your social skills and improve your date life. Go and check his channel out. Yeah,
leave a link, and then if you guys want to check out like any of my dating work, just go to highintegrityskills.com or search for High Integrity Skills on YouTube.
Cool.
Cool. Thanks.